Over the last several weeks, our government has made a series of announcements to combat the production, the distribution, and the trafficking of illegal synthetic opioids like fentanyl.
Finally!
We made the largest investment in Canadian history into Canadian border security with a $1.3 billion investment. We will ban more precursors from entering Canada unchecked. We appointed a fentanyl czar to coordinate between all levels of government, agencies, and law enforcement to tackle the fentanyl crisis, which is ravaging our communities. And today, we're going after the money.
Yeah. After all, why not?
Transnational criminal organizations, including cartels, play a leading role in the production and distribution of fentanyl throughout Canada. To rid Canada of this scourge, our government will ensure law enforcement has every tool available to dismantle and disrupt the operations of these organizations in our communities. These listed entities are organized crime groups that spread fear in local populations by using methods of extreme violence and are known for drug trafficking, human trafficking, and trafficking in illegal guns. The listing of an entity under the Criminal Code follows a rigorous and ongoing process that must meet a legal threshold. Listings are in fact based on evidence, intelligence, and the law. All 7 of these transnational criminal organizations clearly meet this threshold. Once an entity is listed, it is considered to be a terrorist group under the Criminal Code. The Criminal Code prohibits certain actions in relation to terrorist groups, including those related to terrorist financing, travel, and recruitment. It is prohibited for any person in Canada, as well as every Canadian abroad, to knowingly deal with the property of a terrorist group. Let me repeat that. It is prohibited for any person in Canada, as well as every Canadian abroad, to knowingly deal with the property of a terrorist group. To avoid criminal liability, banks and brokerages will freeze these entities' assets, which can then be the subject of seizure, restraint, or forfeiture. It is also an offence to collect property or provide financial or other related services, knowing it will benefit or be used by a terrorist group. We continue to review and evaluate for potential listing of any additional transnational organized crime groups that may pose a risk to people in Canada and Canadians abroad and Canada's national security. If the required threshold is met, we will not hesitate to list them as terrorist entities as well. The measures we are taking will help keep fentanyl off Canadian streets and from entering the United States. To speak plainly, we are moving aggressively, using every tool in our toolbox to take the profit out of drug trafficking.
Prime Minister is doing is massively increasing the drug overdose crisis in this country. He has been providing taxpayer dollars for high-powered drugs that have flooded our streets and lowered the cost of hydromorphine on the streets by as much as 95% in Vancouver, leading to the deaths of 30,000 Canadians. Will the Prime Minister back away from his reckless plan to join with the NDP in BC and decriminalize crack, heroin, and other deadly drugs?
From today's listings to working closely with our United States partners to stopping the smuggling of drugs and firearms that hurt communities in both of our countries, we will continue to do all we can to keep Canada safe. Canadians should know we have a strong border, and we are making it stronger. Listing is just one of the many tools that the government has at its disposal to protect and preserve the safety and security of Canadians and everyone who calls Canada home. Thank you very much. Merci. Any questions?
What can law enforcement and security agencies do now that you've listed them that they couldn't do yesterday? What does this actually accomplish when it comes to investigations?
The listing gives law enforcement additional powers to track, trace, find the financing, disrupt it, interrupt it. It also widens the net through which law enforcement can exercise powers, as I just mentioned in my remarks, to deal with actors who are involved. So this is a very important new tool that the RCMP, for example, and other police of jurisdiction will be able to rely on to be able to track and trace the money. We know that by interrupting the money, we're going to have a profound influence on the activities of the groups.
Do you have any evidence that Tren de Aragua operates in Canada or the smaller cartels other than Sinaloa and CJNG? Do you have evidence of them being in Canada?
That's a question I'm going to ask the RCMP Commissioner to answer if you're okay with that. Commissioner Dan?
Thank you, Minister. I can confirm that we do have intelligence that different cartels operate in Canada. There's also strong intelligence that Canadians have actually moved to Mexico and South America to facilitate the transport of certain commodities into Canada, so we are aware of it.
And what about the two street gangs that you included in there as well?
The street gangs, it's the same. The intel picture is very similar. And what's interesting, going back to Catherine's question with regards to what this does, is there's a lot of organized crime groups that are not listed that feed in from the Mexican organized crime group. So if you are supporting an organized crime group that is now listed, you're part of that, and you could be charged under the terrorism legislation.
And Minister, I wanted to ask you, there are reports out today that the party is looking into allegations of foreign interference into Ruby Dalla's campaign. Is that something that has been brought to your attention as Public Safety Minister?
No, it's not. I really have no insight or comment on that. That's a question for the Liberal Party of Canada.
Right.
And has CITE brought anything to your attention about any allegations of foreign
Not aware
interference?
of any of this. I would take that up with the Liberal Party of Canada.
And any candidates, has it been brought to your attention?
The only thing I've been made aware of is the original, or forgive me, the comments made by CITE. I believe it was last week or 2 weeks ago with respect to one of the candidates. I'm not aware of this. Thank you.
You used the phrase, the government used the phrase IMVE, ideologically motivated violent extremism, for quite a while now. And one of the things that used to make a group a candidate for the terror list was an ideological or a political motivation or a religious motivation. These groups don't seem to have that. So are we redefining terrorism now?
No, what we're doing today is relying on the work of our expert intelligence and security agencies who monitor the activities of different groups in the Canadian context on an ongoing basis. And on the basis of the evidence, on the basis of the intelligence, and on the basis of the law, as determined in the process that's set out in the Criminal Code, those intelligence and security agencies have given me assurances, and I have relied on it, in recommending the listing of these groups under the Criminal Code.
Why would this not apply?
I would say that the definition of IMV or other actors in this space hasn't changed. I would say that this is a specific decision around listing that reflects the seriousness of the disruption that these groups exercised in Canadian communities. These are ruthless, transnational criminal organizations. And so as a result of their advice to me, we've proceeded with the listing.
The same could be said, though, of groups like the Hells Angels, the Italian Mafia, the Ndrangheta. They don't seem to be on the list.
I would say to you that our expert intelligence and security organizations are monitoring these things on an ongoing basis. And if they have additional information they want to impart to me, we would be pleased to receive it.
The Americans seem to put similar cartels on a similar list today. Was this done in coordination with the Americans?
Canada is a sovereign and independent country. We are taking sovereign and independent decisions, and the decision to list is a sovereign and independent one. This is about keeping our community safe. I would dare say now that a strong border is contributing to safer communities. I met, for example, with a senior police chief just yesterday in Toronto. Had a chance to see some of the CBSA facilities with commercial operations. It's clear now that what's happening at our border, what's happening with some of the measures we're announcing today, these listings, are going to contribute positively to keeping our community safe.
So this is just a coincidence then. At 11:45, I've got a thing here from the State Department. They name a bunch of the same organizations we've named as terrorist entities. This is just a surprise that we're both doing the same thing at the same time?
You're bringing that to my attention for the first time. I wasn't aware they were listing at 11:45. We're moving forward. We're doing what we have to do.
Are you serious?
And President Trump today referred to
Let
Canada.
me just also say this. We can't tackle these challenges unless we tackle them together. Right? This is part and parcel of our border plan. We're connected. This is our largest trading partner, our largest neighbor, our largest, most trusted ally over 150 plus years. So we're not going to wrestle, we can't wrestle the fentanyl crisis to the ground alone. Neither can the Americans. So the fact, for example, that we are creating a joint strike force in Canada and between our countries to deal with the fentanyl crisis, to wrestle it to the ground, indicates the level of integration. And as the Commissioner can speak to in great detail, the cooperation that's going on now between our two countries is close, as it should be, because it's ravaging both American and Canadian communities.
President Trump today referred to Canada again as the 51st state and called the Prime Minister, Governor Trudeau, when he was tweeting about tonight's hockey game. Does that kind of rhetoric make it difficult when you're talking about having this cooperation?
Sounds like President Trump's worried about the outcome of the hockey game tonight.
Do you have any serious?
Look, this discussion of 51st state. Canada is a sovereign and independent country, has been for over 150 years, and will remain so. It will always be so. This discussion of 51st state is a non-starter. We acknowledge the concerns that have been brought to our attention by a new administration, and we're working hand in glove to try to wrestle them to the ground. And that's what we're doing. Strong Canadian border makes for strong national security. Strong American border makes for strong American national security. We get that. Two sovereign and independent countries that have managed their relationship well for a long time. We intend to continue.
Commissioner Jehan, we've heard from the Americans saying that there's a big issue, for the Commissioner, sorry, Minister.
Forgive me.
That there's been a large amount of drugs that move by mail, that it's in small quantities that go through, in particular fentanyl. And they've also claimed that Canada is a big producer of fentanyl and that despite the numbers don't show it at the border, we actually do make a lot here. Do you think, both on the mail side and the production side, that the Americans' concerns are legitimate in terms of Canada's ability to produce fentanyl?
Well, I'll start by saying it's been reported in the news several times, a small percentage that's going north to south. But even if there's a small percentage, we take it very seriously. And I've shared it before. Since 2018, we've dismantled 47 labs across the country. Law enforcement has dismantled. So there's a lot of good work going on. There is concern, as the Minister said, we want to strengthen the border. The strike force that we have that are going to be in place, that are going to be targeting specifically fentanyl, is what we didn't have before. And on the international scene, we're expanding our footprint in the United States to make sure we can work with our American colleagues to address the problem.
And how much of that percentage is related to any of these Mexican cartels that you've listed today?
Well, we know, I'm not going to get to specific percentage, but we know that the cartel has a footprint in Canada, and we know that they're involved in fabricating fentanyl and the export of some of the precursors that are used to make fentanyl.
Question to Kat.
If I could just add to that as well, just if I could, Commissioner. Look, part and parcel of the listing is also to avoid any further profligation or any expansion. We're working now, we're using every tool in the toolbox. This is an important tool. And the Commissioner knows only too well as an operational person that this is on Canadian soil, on American soil, and this is an important tool now to get this under control.
This was a promise made to U.S. President Donald Trump. So have you shared this list with his administration before this announcement, and have you received any feedback when it comes to the tariff threat conversation?
I'm sure that our folks at Global Affairs are sharing this outcome with their counterparts. I haven't received any feedback, but I'm looking forward to the hockey game tonight.
Elon Musk is already saying that this listing should justify unilateral U.S. drone strikes in Mexico without the knowledge or permission of the Mexican government. What would be the position of Canada to that?
I'm not sure what he's talking about. I haven't heard what Mr. Musk is pronouncing on.
It's called for airstrikes in Mexico. It's been going on for over a year.
Yeah.
And listings like this on the Houthis and other terrorist groups have led to those kinds of strikes.
That's not on Canada's radar screen.
Object to the U.S.
That's
launching
not
unilateral
Canada.
airstrikes.
That's not on Canada's radar screen, and I can't divine what's in Mr. Musk's thinking in this regard. I didn't know, to be a little bit cute maybe or cheeky, I didn't know he was a geopolitical expert as well.